What is happening, y'all? Cowboy here, and welcome to my 2020 build update video. Today's video, we're going to be going through how I have updated every weapon set as we move into the new year. Obviously, these sets include weapons as well as armor pieces from the Safi'jiiva siege, and I'll be going through 12 of the weapons. I don't have a bow build or a hunting horn build, simply because I don't use those weapons enough to justify going through the farming to create the build. But other than that, let's get into it. These builds are mostly a combination of preference as well as meta. So there you will see some builds that are pretty much just standard meta and then some that deviate from it. But the first up is my switch axe build. Now, obviously, we're working with the Safi Shatter Axe. In particular, the blast variant of the Safi weapons are very, very good all-around choices. Blast is pretty much universal. It'll hurt any monster that's not immune to it, and the blast procs on these weapons are pretty beefy, coming in at around 600 damage. Now, this build, as well as the Insect Glaive and the Lance build, are all 100% static affinity builds. What I mean by that is that when our weapon is drawn, we have 100% affinity. We are not reliant on Agitator to hit that threshold. We're not relying on Weakness Exploit to hit that threshold. And all in all, it creates a very comfy, almost lazy way to play these builds. The standard loadout for this is going to be Safi Crown, Van Braces, and Boots, and then the Kaiser Coil and the Kaiser Mail. Now, if you're just trying to go for a Safi Master's Touch 100% combo with Weakness Exploit, instead you would want to use the Safi Chest and then the Kaiser Van Braces. But going on into the decorations, our base weapon here, you'll notice that we have 2 affinity awakens on it, and then on top of that we also have an affinity augment on it as well. Now that's going to give us a 35% affinity on our weapon alone. Our attack charm is going to boost that on up to 40. We are going to get another 40 affinity coming in from our critical eye to put us up at 80, and when our weapon is drawn with a 3-piece Safi set bonus, we gain another 20%, putting us at the static 100. Now, most of these builds are a template. I kind of went through this on the Insect Glaive build, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but there is a little bit of flexibility to kind of move stuff around and make the weapon ideally what you want. In particular, with the Switch Axe, we are running 2 Evade Extender here, and then, of course, the 1 Earplug Jewel so that I have level 5 Earplug anytime I go for a discharge. Aside from that, looking back at the particular awakens, to ideally run this, what I found the best is going for the Sharpness 6, 2 Affinity 5, and then the Attack 5 with Teostra technique. Having Sharpness 6 means you only need to have 2 Handicraft to hit Purple Sharpness, and since we have 100% Affinity and Master's Touch, you'll never fall off Purple. Ideally, you want to have a Handicraft plus Deco to pull this off, but if you don't have one, you can obviously get by without it. As for the other skills, some pretty standard stuff here. We have our 4 attack coming in from the necklace. Crit boost, we have 1 critical jewel slot, the rest is coming in from the set. A lot of stuff gemmed on in for expert. We have 1 spare slot here, which we dropped a resistor jewel in just to get our blight resist up to 2, meaning any blights only last for 15 seconds. And the rest of these abilities are mostly coming in from our armor. Now, obviously, a lot of these builds are going to be very, very heavily based on decoration. So one thing I want to point out is while we are in the holidays, you can use the Steamworks to get a ton of tickets, in particular steel tickets, silver tickets, and gold tickets, and then trade those in at the melter to get gems. Since they started doing this, I have went from 2 attack decos up to 7 attack decos, as well as a countless number of expert jewels. I want to say I have something like 10 or 15 expert jewels now. I've gotten extra crit boosts, I've gotten extra wex. So if you have been low on decos, now is the time. Take all that ore, go to the Steamworks, put a rubber band around your controller, and just put that thing on repeat for about 2 hours and get every single deco that you have ever wanted. The level 4 decos only come from the gold tickets, so you're not going to get a buttload of those, but everything besides the level 4 you can mostly get from silvers. So attack, free element, crit boost, focus, it doesn't matter, you'll get your deco doing that. So moving on from there, the IG build we've gone through before, pretty standard. I do want to point out, a lot of people kept asking what I had. The Velkhana 3/4s, this is the upgrade to the Pseudocanaf. It's basically a high-speed blast-type insect. It works really, really well. It's just like kind of your standard go-to. If you don't like that, there's a blast variant or a blunt variant of a very similar one as well. But the main difference here, looking at the Insect Glaive build, is we've slotted in Enhancer to have Power Prolonger. This is just going to make our stuff last that much longer. And then in addition, I got the 1-point Geology down here, which makes this a nice thing to bring along in the Guided Lands, as the 1-point Geology bug still works. For those unaware, if you have 1 point of Geology, anytime you wallbang a monster, it will drop double the amount of shinies. So if it was going to drop 1, you get 2. If it was going to drop 3, you get 6. Very, very nice if you're going into the Guided Lands, but otherwise pretty much an identical template to the previous build. In terms of quality, I'm a big fan of Recovery Up here. Recovery Up obviously having some excellent synergy with the health augment. On all of these weapons for the 100% set, I'm going for affinity increase and health regen. I just find that to be the comfiest combination. Moving on into the Lance build, once again running this same 100% static affinity set. A couple things have changed around on the Lance build. Looking at our decorations here, you can see we have gone for Guardian decos to take our offensive guard up to 3. In addition to that, we have put our regular guard up at 3. Blight Resist is down here, as well as Sacrificing Wax. We don't need that once again. Now, this build doesn't have the second augment yet, mainly because I'm still farming. So without that second augment, we are down 10% affinity from where we want to be. So that is something to keep in mind. Obviously, Challenger can help boost that up so that we're at 95% when it's active, but I still need to get an affinity augment on this. But in particular, the only real changes here are we've worked in offensive guard as well as guard into the Lance variant, making it a bit beefier when it comes to its defensive capabilities. So moving on down, Greatsword. Now we're getting into a pretty standard meta set here. There are a couple different variants to Greatsword. You either go pure attack on it, or alternatively, you go attack 5, 5, 6, and then 2 sharpness 5 to hit purple. Now, the purple will do slightly more effective damage than going pure attack. However, you only have you have much less sharpness. And what I mean by that is that you're going to drop out of purple, and as soon as you drop out of purple, this will be weaker than just going with 5 attack ups. So obviously with Master's Touch and a Greatsword, it's not that hard to maintain the purple. I feel like in general with Greatsword, if you're hitting a weak point. It's a slow weapon, you know what you're aiming for. But whether you go pure attack or attack with 2 sharpness 5s, it's really going to come down to preference. I like having the purple sharpness here because I do not want a Greatsword attack to ever bounce. If I'm in my startup animation and something bounces, it just throws off my whole rhythm. So that is what we've gone for. In addition to that, I will have a link to the meta builds in the description for people that really want to get more into the min-maxing here. But once again, we went for affinity and health regen on here. I'm trying to change this up to attack. I actually don't need that affinity. It's dead affinity, I guess you could call it. As you can see, we're at 60%, and that's before we're accounting for Wex. So I basically put that on because I didn't have the mats for attack for the time being. But pretty standard loadout here. We have Crit Eye at 7, Agi at 5, attack boost, recovery up, crit boost, Wex. I opt for 2 points of focus as opposed to 3. This is very much going to be personal preference, but I find that 2 focus is more than enough to get by using Greatsword. If you want 3, slot it on in. Like I said, this is very much a preference thing. With our Glider Mantle, which a lot of people have been asking about the Glider Mantle. Glider Mantle has an incredibly high uptime. So having my Vitality decos in there just means that I have Health Boost 3 the majority of the fight. Glider Mantle is, I want to say it's up for like 3 minutes, and the cooldown is like 30 seconds, or it's something ridiculous like that. I know those numbers are off, but all in all, it's very good. But this is pretty much your standard go-to for Greatsword. You can't go wrong with this. Going for the 3-piece Kaiser, Garuga Greaves, and Damascus Mail. Damascus Mail in particular giving you some very nice decoration slots, along with also bringing 2 points of focus on into the mix, which is standard for Greatsword. Really can't go wrong with this build. You're not going to bounce because you have purple, you have Master's Touch, you have high damage. Moving on down the list to Hammer. And with Hammer, we mix things up a little bit. You can see that we have slightly deviated from what a lot of people consider meta. In particular, I have a Earplugs charm on, and I'm a really big fan of plugs with Hammer. With Hammer, you're constantly focusing the face. Generally, if a monster is roaring, its face is just a big open target that you could hit. So because of that, we went ahead and worked in earplugs. Pretty easy. Get your earplugs charm up to level 4. Add in 1 earplug deco. Boom, level 5. And even then, we still have in a lot of our core DPS boosts here. We have Crit Eye. We have Crit Boost. We have Wex. We have 3 in Agitator. Our attack boost goes up to a base of 4, 6 when we have Temporal on. We got some Blast Attack. We have Fortify in there. And of course, we have Master's Touch. Now, one of the big deviations here is I'm not running the Blast Hammer. If you want just pure damage, Blast Hammer is a fantastic choice. I really like Paralysis with Hammer, so I opted for the Paralysis. You know, this way, if the monster's roaring, I'm bonking it in the face. If the monster's KO'd, I'm bonking it in the face. If the monster's paralyzed, I'm bonking it in the face. All in all, I just find this to be a very, very comfortable way to play Hammer. Once again, health regen. Health regen is going to be on pretty much every single one of these sets. But yeah, Plug's Hammer is super, super enjoyable to play. So this is what we're running with. Moving on from the Hammer, we have Gunlance. Now, Gunlance, I also mix things up a little bit, working on plugs, but it's a little bit trickier because you are still going to want to have a Razor Sharp Charm to help maintain your sharpness. So with the charm up, we're going to have plugs. Our crit eye is only at level 5. We have our artillery at 5, however. We have Wex, we have evade extender at 3, capacity boost, of course, and then spare shot. Now, the thing that's interesting about Gunlance is you can stack all the attack you want. It's not going to change your shelling. Our shelling is purely based on 2 things. 1, our shelling level, and 2, the level of our artillery. So besides that, nothing else is going to increase the amount of shelling damage we're going to do. So in this case, you know, we're already at normal level 7. That's coming in from the shelling normal 2 on the Safi weapon. Besides that, we obviously wanted Zora Magdaros Essence so we could drop 1 piece of Zora and work in a different piece of gear. And then besides that, it's just taking attack 6, bringing that attack up as high as we can. Now you'll notice that I have 2 sharpness 5s, and this does put me in the purple. And the thing is, I'm not really all that concerned with purple. The main moves of our Gunlance rotation have built-in Mind's Eye, our slam down as well as our sweep. Those aren't going to bounce. What we really want here is that nice big white bar of sharpness. This is going to allow me, between that bar of sharpness and razor sharp, I'm going to be able to rotate through my abilities for pretty much an entire hunt. I might need 1 sharpen after, 10 minutes into a hunt, but you're basically never going to hit blue. Now, your sharpness isn't, your shelling, I should say, actually isn't going to change until we're all the way down to, I believe it's yellow. But obviously, once you get into blue or green, there's a chance that your basic attacks could bounce off the monster. So I like having the double sharpness 5s here. Sharpness is just really nice to have on a Gunlance. But besides that, we have the health augment, of course. To help achieve the plugs, we've worked in the Garuga Van Braces here, which they come with 3 points in plugs, so we got that, and then a plug jewel here and a plug jewel here, boosting us on up to the 5 plugs. Our critical eye is a little bit less than I would have liked, but at the end of the day, since the majority of our damage is going to be our shelling, I'm okay with that sacrifice. As for weakness exploit or crit boost, I opted for weakness exploit just to take the crit even higher. And then you actually could fit in even more damage here. I have 3 jumping jewels in. You could easily run 3 crit boost, but between testing with evade extender and without it, I found that the extra mobility was very nice to have, ultimately deciding to run with that. So some of the main things here, obviously, we have the plugs, we want our artillery up at 5, we want capacity boost, and we want razor sharp. Beyond that point, you can decide between damage or utility. I obviously opted for some utility and some decent damage, but that's it for Gunlance. Obviously, a very nice Gunlance as well. Just to give a comparison here, right before this event started, we had the Stygian come out, and looking at this, you can see, more damage than it. We have paralysis, we have a larger slot on it, we got Zora Magdaros Essence on it, and a ton of white sharpness. You might be like, oh, Stygian has more purple. But the thing is, by the time Stygian's in green, mine is still in white. So all in all, just a fantastic Gunlance. Moving on from the Gunlance, though, getting into Sword and Shield and Longsword. Both of these are pretty much your standard go-to meta sets. Kaiser, Garuga, Rexroar. This is the golden crown of meta, I guess you could say. It's very hard to beat this set in terms of just damage. We have attack boost at 7, crit eye at 7, agi at 5, crit boost at 3, wex at 3. Our blast attack goes up to 4 when our temporal mantel's on. Obviously, I'm a big fan of recovery up. You'll see me use recovery up on almost every build I run with. And this is just pretty much your standard go-to, I want to do damage and still have Master's Touch at the same time type set. I run almost an identical set on the Longsword as well. As for the Awakenings here, just straight attack. on the Sword and Shield. Can't really go wrong with it. And in particular, you're probably like, why am I going so hard on Sword and Shield? Sword and Shield actually got a really, really big damage buff. So just to kind of show that real fast, I'm going to weaken this thing. Get a second weaken here. They essentially buffed Perfect Rush by a really, really beefy margin. So just to show that real fast, this damage is stupid. And that's without the launch off. Almost 2,000 damage. If that was a monster and we had the launch off technique, it would have hit 2,000. So if you've ever, done damage tests on the dummy, 2,000 damage is not a small amount. So the point is, Sword and Shield is actually, like, beefy now. On top of that, another thing I do think is worth showing, because this kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people, but the roll clutch claw move for Sword and Shield, where you roll and then hit the left trigger, that now does an instant weak point. So you can see we have the scarring across the barrels, instant weak point, same as if you're using a heavy weapon, which makes it one of the, if not the best weapon for weak pointing monsters in the game. Moving on from there, down to the Longsword. Very, very similar build. Obviously, I'm changing up the aesthetics here, but going to our decos, you can see pretty much the same jam here. We have our attack boost, crit eye, agi, recovery up, crit boost, wex. Blast attack is still coming in up to 4 from the slots. As for the weapon, however, we've mixed it up. We've gone for the 3 attacks and the 2 sharpness increase to give us purple. Now with Sword and Shield, I find that it's easy to stay on a weak point because of mobility, but I love doing Perfect Rush. I love jumping up in the air and coming down with the punch or coming down with the slash to get a mount. So more often than not, when I'm doing Perfect Rush or I'm trying to get the mount, if I deviate and I don't hit a weak point, my sharpness is going to drop a little bit, which is why I went pure attack and stayed with white sharpness for the Sword and Shield. For Longsword, I find that it's pretty easy to stay on the weak point of your target. Even when you're doing your EI counters and whatnot, usually those are going to hit the monster as it's charging at you, so you're going to hit the head. If you have trouble staying on weak points, I would suggest going for pure attack instead. If you're confident in your ability to stay on the weak point, go for the double sharpness 5 upgrade. Moving on from Longsword, though, we have our elemental sets. Now, I have 2 different elementals. I have dual blades as well as charge blade. I'm using dual blade for water and ice. I'm using charge blade for dragon and fire. This is purely preference. It's not that, dragon charge blade is better than dual blade charge blade. 100%. The monsters that are weaker to fire and dragon, I like fighting with charge blade, whereas the ice and water weak monsters, I like fighting with dual blades. Let's take a look at that peak damage, baby. Now, this is one that we ended up doing the numbers for on stream for quite a while, and then when they actually ran the meta sets, it turned out this was the strongest dual blade build in the game, which obviously inflated my ego quite a bit. But anyway, basic gist here is pick your weapon, pick the element, and just go straight. Pure element up, 5, 5, 5, 6, 5. That's all you need. You can see that puts us up at a base of 450 water, and what makes this so crazy is when our weapon's out, you can see we're at 720 water. On dual blades, that's absurd. Anyway, back to the decorations. So pure water on that. We are running 3-piece Safi with the crown, the van braces, and the boots, and then 2-piece Rhyme Guard, so Rhyme Guard coil and Rhyme Guard mail. In terms of damage numbers, because we get a significant element boost when our weapon is out with the Safi'jiiva, that, along with a base critical eye, is going to do more damage than true critical element. So all in all, a very potent set. Looking at the skills in particular, you can see we want to take our water attack up to 6. Crit eye we only have at 5, but that's going to be fine. Keep in mind that when we withdraw our weapon, we're getting 20% affinity, and then when you consider weakness exploit, that number is going to go up to 100. So you only need to take your crit eye up to 5. Crit boost obviously at 3, weakness exploit at 3. As for our sharpness, you're going to want to go for a item prolong or sharp combo. This is going to give you 90 seconds on your protective polish, which is more than enough to basically shred the monster and then get through the remainder of time before you need to sharpen. Ideally, you want a hard enduring. If you have a hard enduring, that will, it'll put all 3 points of item prolonger in one level 4 deco. I haven't been lucky enough to get it yet. The other thing I want to point out here is Coalescence. Coalescence just boosts its damage even more, which is dirty. So ideally, if I had a hard enduring, I'd drop in a second blight resist. That would take my blight timers down to 15 seconds, so they would innately fall off after 15 seconds, procking Coalescence. Coalescence can also proc, you can get into an area that's on fire, roll 3 times to put the fire out, Coalescence is up. Go to a poison cup, hit it, get poisoned, cure the poison, Coalescence is up. And so when you have Coalescence up, you're going to be doing silly amounts of damage. It's that's all there is to it. It's ridiculous how much damage you're doing with this set and Coalescence active at the same time. Looking at the ice, you can see these builds are literally identical, but just to show it real fast, the only thing that I am changing between these builds is the charm. I went to a frost charm here, and I went to a frost jewel here. Besides that, everything else is going to be identical for the dual blades. It's very potent, does a lot of damage very fast. Great go-to build. As for the charge blades, let's take a look at the Drac Shield. Now you can see this time we went for full Safi. In terms of charge blade damage, full Safi has proven to be very potent. In particular, I messed around with 5-piece Safi as well as 3-piece Safi and Master's Touch. All in all, I found 5-piece Safi to just be more enjoyable. Master's Touch can work very well with Savage Axe. Obviously, you just eat through sharpness, but at the same time, the thing is, Savage Axe, true to its name, is very savage. It's going all over the place, and there's going to be times where those hits aren't actually connecting with a weak spot. So because of that, I found that while Master's Touch did help with Elemental Charge Blade, I didn't find the quality of life I gained from it worth losing out on the extra element, especially because if you just go with a handicraft charm, we have handicraft at 4 here. This is more than enough that I can get through the entire first phase of a hunt on my sharpness alone. And ideally, if I had a handicraft plus, I could slot in a handicraft plus deco and I could run a razor sharp, and that would even be more effective. I don't have handicraft plus, of course, so we went for the handicraft charm. But as for some of the other things here, obviously take your elemental attack up to 6, crit boost at 3, wex at 3, focus up at 3, evade windows coming in from the armor. Our crit eye, we actually don't have almost any crit eye here. We have 1 point of crit eye, and that is intentional. When we draw our weapon with this set, because we have 5-piece Safi, we are getting a 40% increase to our affinity. So with 1 crit eye plus the 5 on the weapon, that is going to put us at 50%, at which point we're relying on Tenderizer to take care of the rest. Fortify capacity boost, our 1 point in guard, pretty standard go-to charge blade build. We have our 1 point, we have the cap, we have the focus. This is going to do a lot of damage very, very fast. Moving on into the fire build, very similar, and a lot of these can be improved upon with the right decorations. In particular, with the fire build, I have double blaze jewels plus 4, so it was even easier to slot stuff on into this build. A little bit more flexibility in how I want to move things around. And if you have the decos, you could just go 3 blaze jewels pluses, but I didn't want to go that deep into blaze jewels. But all in all, almost identical here. We still have the point of guard. We still have some health boost. I have a little bit more recovery up worked in on this build. Weakness exploit crit. I managed to slot in the full blight resistance because I have the blazed echoes, so that freed up a slot for me. But all in all, very similar. Once again, we are going with pure element up on this weapon. The handicraft is going to put us up enough to where we can fight the monster up to its zone transition, and then we'll have to worry about sharpening. But very, very potent charge blade builds, just to kind of give a feel here for how much damage we're getting off on one of these. See, we're sitting, and this obviously weakness on this thing is kind of goofy, but we saw 232 per file. So you can imagine how this ramps up against monsters that are weak to fire. Moving on from the charge blades, though, let's look at everybody's new daddy, the Safi Burst Cannon. Now, this thing is just a disgusting force to be reckoned with. It's essentially Glutton 3.0. This is my personal preference for running it. I run 3 shields and then 2 close range up. I run Impact Mantle, and that has some Slugger decorations in it. But taking a look at the cannon, I went for Slot Upgrade 3, Spread Capacity 3, Recoil Suppressor, and then 2 Attack Increase 5s. I found this to be the comfiest way to build this. You're going to want recoil suppressor for sure. Spread capacity, you're obviously going to want that as high as you can get it, because that's more spread ammo you're putting on out. But looking, you can see we have our base spread ammo is at a capacity of 8. So that's pretty dirty. Close range up is just making that even beefier. In particular with 3 shields, I'm also running guard level 5. This is going to make me pretty much immune to damage. Anything that I can block, which you'll notice I also have a guard up decoration, I'm going to block it. So this can shut down almost all damage through blocking. We have our ammo up there boosting things even higher. We have blight resist, so we don't need to worry about blights. We have crit boost, we have Wex, we have our double spread shot up, we have some agitator, some fortify. And you're probably wondering, if you're doing all this, why not work in, say, more attack? And the thing is, we're actually seeing very, very minor returns because of how powerful this weapon is. Stacking more attack on, like there's basically certain breakpoints that you need to hit to even see more damage on your pellets. So with where we're at, I found this to be a more consistent way to run this build. This is a lot more defensive oriented, but with guard 5, guard up, and then of course 3 shields, we're basically invincible. You can face tank or a Zhang blast, and you're just like, hee, that tickled. So still lots of damage on top of having immense survivability. Sluggers on the impact, of course, but true Dragon Vein Awakening, that, as I mentioned before, is pulling us up with 40% affinity, so that is putting us up to 95% when our weapon is drawn. All in all, very, very nice. Moving on from the blast cannon, we have the Aquashot. Now, if you are a fan of sticky gunning, this is your new baby. And the reason for this is we can now go for true artillery and true spare shot. So Nargacuga Essence, pure attack augment on this thing. Obviously I have health regen on it. I did not have health regen on the blast cannon. You don't get enough health back using spread shot to justify it. Just go attack with that. But this is all we need. We only have sticky level 2. We have 2 of sticky 2, 2 of sticky 3. That's more than enough. You're going to want 2 evade reloads, so you can reload those as needed, as well as recoil suppressor. And we have artillery 5 here, so artillery secret. We have true spare shot. We have our attack boost up at least 4. We have the tremor resist, ammo up, peak performance, recovery, slugger, agitator, flinch free, piercing shot, all that stuff. A lot of that's coming in from the gear, but the big thing here is we have true spare shot in addition to level 5 artillery. And this basically is just going to do a buttload of damage when it comes to stunning the monster. This build is an absolute beast with KO. One thing I do think is worth noting is, as for your ammo here, you will do more damage off of the sticky, the level 2 sticky, if it ever goes off here. As you can see, we're looking at 132 there, whereas the sticky 3, I'll just let this, it should reset before it goes off, 120. But what I want you to keep in mind is that with sticky 3, we're able to just fire and keep moving. So, there's no downtime. You're very much on the target constantly. Whereas sticky 2, while you're getting more damage, we are going to be locked in place for that double shot. So that's basically the one thing to keep in mind with the build like this. If the monster is down on the ground and you can get the easy damage, sticky 2 is going to put out more. However, sticky 3 comes with slightly less damage and much higher mobility. And with all those, that is actually it. That was the final set. So besides that, the other stuff I have, this is older stuff, the super support set still. A lot of this is very old, so we're not going to go into all that, but that is the current state of my sets. Goddamn, 28 minutes. This took way longer than I thought it would to go through all of them. But to close on out, obviously the Safi'jiiva has opened up possibilities that were previously just, we're in a state in Monster Hunter where damage is just out of this world. We are doing buttloads of damage. We have, the ability to run 2 different set bonuses at once. We have the ability to hit 100% static affinity. Basically, the build crafting in this game has never been in a better state before, and it is absolutely awesome where it's at right now. So either way, guys, thanks for coming by. I hope you enjoyed the updates. As a reminder, I will have a link to the meta compendium down in the description below. In addition to that, if you want to join the streams to play Iceborne, we play PS4 on Mondays and we are playing on PC on Tuesdays. So come on out and join the hunts. Other than that, thanks for coming by, and I'll catch you all next time.